My project is on the Gorkha earthquake which hit Nepal in 2015. May 1st, a 7-point magnitude earthquake hit the Gorkha region of Nepal. This was roughly 80 kilometers northwest of the capital city of Kathmandu. As you can see on this map above, it's roughly a 3-hour and 4-minute drive and 136 kilometers driving distance. This area is very densely populated, and it is also where I was born and spent the first 6 years of my life. Fun fact. So what caused this earthquake? All right. In the scholarly article, Insights from Earthquake Damage Survey, 7 university students talk about how this earthquake took place at the subduction interface along the Himalayan arc, where the Indian plate meets the Eurasian plate. As we talked about in class, these two plates are a convergent plate, where two plates are going at each other and eventually overlapping. The part where the earthquake took place is when the top tectonic plate thrusts up and releases all this energy. So, kind of to elaborate on that more, the Indian plate is going towards the Eurasian plate. Eventually, once they meet, they have to overlap. In this case, the Eurasian plate is being thrusted upwards, meanwhile, the Indian plate is going downwards like this. When this happens, there's a lot of friction which causes on the Eurasian plate, and eventually the Eurasian plate thrusts up just like that, and that is pretty much how the earthquake was caused. Alright, so the rupture process. The rupture process is when seismic energy is released during a slip or thrust in the fault. The rupture process took place on April 25, 2015, just 6 days before the initial earthquake. In an article at AGU Publications, Peter M. Shearer details a rupture using the teleseismic P waves. It's stated that P waves suggest a multi-stage rupture process. The low-frequency images reflect the initial down-dip rupture near the nucleation area. This was then followed by the 2 up-dip ruptures, which released most of the radiated energy northeast of Kathmandu. So what he's talking about here is that the initial down-dip rupture actually takes place on this diagram, where it says down-dip with, and the 2 up-dip ruptures after that takes place on this other plate where it says rupture top depth on that plate, which should be the Eurasian plate from what we're looking at. The rupture pattern correlated well with how the aftershocks were distributed over a period of months on end. Effects on people. The Gorkha earthquake killed nearly 9,000 people and injured 22,000 people. The Gorkha district was hit the hardest. However, many other cities such as Kathmandu and other districts around the mountainous areas suffered the most. Why is that? Well, one reason is that just like Keene, there are a lot of valleys in Nepal. And when you have a valley which gets hit with this severe earthquake, what happens is all the landslide absolutely just crushes the village in the middle of the valley. Another reason is the lack of help. And what I say by that is the response time in which these people, the help pretty much gets to the area in the valleys and up north towards the mountains, which is very hard to get to in the first place. One of my sources, Manju Persai, who is also my aunt, explained how she dealt with what was going on. Manju Persai has lived in Kathmandu her whole life. When the main earthquake hit on May 1st, 2015, it was around early morning into the daytime. I would say roughly around noon. All of a sudden, everything was vibrating, which got more and more severe. She knew what was going on and ran outside to a nearby field with my uncle. She said she heard a lot of people screaming and running outside, and as she waved at people to come towards the field. A few hours later, she could also see an old brick building just slightly tip over, then collapse completely. She told me this was the only time in her life she was happy to have a small house, so at least she could make light of the situation. Manju and her husband lived in a small garage-like building for a few weeks until they moved into their sister's house around the Pokhara region. The aftershock lasted months on end. There were plenty of instances where my parents and I would call, and they would casually just explain how an earthquake had hit the day before, or an earthquake had had the day of, and it was just such a normal part of their life from then on. Two of the main points I got out of talking to my aunt about this was that she explained how traumatizing walking around Soyambu. Soyambu is like a area in Kathmandu where I grew up, and she just talked about how traumatizing it was. There were people just looking around for their mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, family, friends, whoever. Another thing which I took out of this was that it was just an absolute nightmare for the people living there. Um, just they would just not know when this earthquake would end. Like the aftershocks were just nonstop for months on end. So it was just very traumatizing for everybody in Nepal. Um, the the aftershock. LB Adhikari, in one of my sources, talks about how 3,000 aftershocks took place in the first 45 days past the initial earthquake. Because of the dense population, around 600,000 infrastructures collapsed. And right now, I will show a quick video to close this out. All right. So just by looking at this small area, you can tell how close these buildings are to each other, and just how densely populated it is. It's just very evident how all of these taller buildings are just so vulnerable. And anybody living in these taller buildings, mainly apartments, hotels, etc., they're just completely homeless after this earthquake. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. You can see how everything just completely comes to a standstill. Everybody's confused. They clearly know what's going on. The earthquakes are a normal thing. However, they just don't know where to go. You can't run from this at all. I'm going to end this right there. Thank you.